The first time I saw my husband in handcuffs, he still tried to smile at me. The courtroom lights were too bright, buzzing overhead, turning his white coat memories into something sterile and ugly. Reporters whispered behind me, pens scratching, cameras ready to catch me breaking. I didn't break. I stared at the man who had slept beside me for 15 years and realized my body had never belonged to me. My name is Nora Hayes. I am 43 years old, and my own husband, a celebrated OB/GYN, secretly planted a banned IUD inside me and left it there for 8 years. Everyone thought this was one tragic medical case, one bad man caught, but what they didn't know was that my story had started long before that day. Before I go any further, I want to know something. Tell me where you're watching from right now. Your city, your country, your couch, your car, wherever you are, I'm listening. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, especially family. Sometimes the people closest to you carry the sharpest knives, and you don't see the cut until it's too deep. This next part of my story, it's where everything truly began. I grew up in a house where love was measured in who got the last piece of chicken. In our small Midwest kitchen, the overhead light hummed, and the vinyl floor curled at the corners. Mom would set down one platter of fried chicken on Sundays, and my little sister Lily would immediately get the biggest piece. Mom's fork moved without thinking, dropping the juiciest thigh on Lily's plate. By the time the platter came to me, all that was left was a dry wing, a few crumbs, and the grease stain on the doily underneath. "That's plenty for you, Nora," Mom would say. Not unkind, just automatic. I was the older one, the sturdy one. The one who didn't need as much. Dad would lean back in his chair, beer bottle sweating in his hand, and ask Lily about her art class, her latest drawing, her latest drama. If I tried to mention the A I'd gotten on my biology test, he'd nod once, eyes on the TV in the corner, blaring a football game. "I'll sign whatever you need later," he'd say. "Pass the salt, kiddo." I learned early that wanting attention looked needy, so I got good at shrinking myself. At swallowing things, at telling myself it was fine. I didn't know it then, but that habit would matter later. By high school, I was the kind of girl teachers loved and boys overlooked. I ran the yearbook, tutored half the football team, worked weekends at the grocery store. On the night of the academic awards banquet, I stood under fluorescent lights in the gym, the floor squeaking under dress shoes instead of sneakers. My name was called for a scholarship, and I climbed the steps to the stage, cheeks hot, palms sweating. From the podium, I scanned the bleachers, looking for my parents. Mom had promised they'd come. Dad said he'd try to make it after work. There were empty spots where I imagined their faces would be, a couple holding hands, a loud cluster cheering for someone else's kid, but not them. The principal shook my hand for the photo, his cologne sharp and minty. The flash went off, bright and white. I smiled for the camera anyway. I didn't know it then, but that was the first of many important moments where I stood alone. Later that night, I walked home in my dress shoes because Dad got tied up and Mom lost track of time. There was cold pizza on the counter and a note. "Proud of you. Sorry we missed it. Long day. Love, Mom." I reheated a slice and told myself this was enough. If you tell yourself something is enough long enough, you start to believe it, even when it isn't. College was my first escape. I chose a state school 2 hours away and a major that sounded practical, human resources. The irony didn't hit me until later, that I'd build a career learning how to manage people and conflict when I had never been allowed to name my own. I worked at the campus coffee shop my first semester. The place always smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon, the grinder screaming at 6 in the morning. Sleep-deprived students shuffled in, wrapped in hoodies, waving meal cards. On Fridays, I did a double shift, then took the bus back home to drop off a little cash for groceries. Mom would hug me at the door, thank me, and later I'd see my brother Tyler posting photos from some concert or bar. Jokes about my amazing sis. He never mentioned that my money had bailed him out of overdraft fees. No one ever said, "This isn't fair," certainly not me. I told myself I was being a good daughter, a good sister. I didn't know I was training myself to accept less and less. The night I met Calvin, I was 24 and working late because one of the HR coordinators had quit. We were rolling out a new attendance policy and the plant workers were furious. I stayed to help sort through schedules and complaints, my eyes burning. At 11 p.m., my boss finally told me to go home. I stepped into the freezing wind of the parking lot, my breath turning white. I was so tired I misjudged the curb and twisted my ankle. Pain shot up my leg, hot and sharp. I dropped my bag, keys skittering under a car. I tried to stand and my ankle buckled. The security guard called an ambulance even though I insisted I was fine. That's how I ended up in the ER under harsh white lights, my pant leg cut up to the knee, skin dotted with salt from the parking lot. Calvin walked in like he owned the place. Dark hair, a little messy, navy scrubs, stethoscope looped around his neck. He checked the chart, then looked at me with steady blue eyes that made everything else in the room blur for a second. "You're the HR manager from Harbor Freight Logistics." "Right," he asked. "You guys send half our accident cases." "That's me," I said. "Apparently I joined the party tonight." He smiled, quick and warm. "Well, at least you're sending yourself to a good hospital." He examined my ankle, fingers firm but careful, asking about my pain, my job, whether someone was coming to pick me up. When I said no, his eyebrows drew together for a second, the first real concern I'd seen directed at me in a long time. "No one," he repeated. "My parents are out of town. I lied. My brother doesn't drive. It's fine. I'll call a cab." He shook his head. "Absolutely not. I don't discharge patients into the void at midnight." It was a joke, but something in me flinched anyway. Into the void was exactly how my life had felt most of the time. He wrapped my ankle, ordered an X-ray, then sat on the little stool and asked about my work in a way that made it sound important. He said, "You must be good at reading people, and they're lucky to have someone like you." I wasn't used to hearing that. By the time he left the room, I was flushed in a way that had nothing to do with the pain meds. When he reappeared with discharge papers and a pair of crutches, he said, "X-ray looks clean, just a nasty sprain." "You'll live good," I said. "I've got a lot of employee files left to fight with." He chuckled. "I'm off in 10. If you can wait, I'll drive you home." Strictly as a doctor, making sure his patient doesn't faceplant in the parking lot, I hesitated. Mom's voice in my head said not to be a burden. Dad's voice said not to expect special treatment. But the throbbing in my ankle and the kindness in Calvin's tone outweighed both. "Okay," I said. "Thank you." I didn't know it then, but accepting that ride home was the first real yes in a series of yeses that would almost cost me my life. Calvin drove a beat-up silver sedan that smelled like stale coffee and hospital soap. The heater rattled as snow whispered against the windshield. At my building, he carried my bag up 3 flights of stairs and waited until I'd lowered myself onto the couch. "If it gets worse, don't tough it out," he said, jotting his number on my discharge papers. "You call me." That's doctor's orders. No one had ever told me not to tough it out. The text started that night. At first it was, "How's the ankle?" Then it turned into midnight photos of cafeteria pizza, complaints about double shifts, my rants about employees faking sick notes. He nicknamed me the sane one. I told him he was my favorite liability. A month later, he asked me out. Quiet Italian place, checkered tablecloths, candles stuck in wine bottles. "You strike me as shrimp Alfredo," he told the waiter, ordering for me without asking. Normally, that would have earned an eye roll. That night, after years of being the afterthought, it felt like someone was finally putting me first. 2 years later, he proposed in the hospital break room at 2 a.m., between a humming soda machine and a microwave that smelled like burnt popcorn. My scrubs were wrinkled, his pager kept buzzing, and he still dropped to one knee. "You take care of everyone else," he said, holding out a simple ring. "Let me take care of you." I said yes through tears. We married in his aunt's backyard. Plastic chairs, fairy lights, lukewarm champagne. His colleagues toasted him as the rock, the calm, and the storm. My parents beamed like I'd won a prize. We bought a beige 2-story in a quiet cul-de-sac. Maple tree in the front yard. I handled people all day at Harbor Freight Logistics. He handled bodies at Mercer Women's Health Center. At events he'd introduce me as my wife, the HR ninja. Being claimed felt better than being invisible. Talk about kids slid in sideways. At a summer cookout, one of his nurses asked, "So when do we get little Mercers?" Someone yelled, "We need a mascot." In the car home, night thick around us, I said, "We should figure that out. Kids." He kept his eyes on the road. "We've got time. You're 33. We'll wait until things settle. Your job's crazy. The clinic's expanding. We'll do it right." Doing it right became our excuse to do nothing. Then the pain came. At first it was a dull ache low in my belly before my period. Ibuprofen, a heating pad, a shrug. I'd curl on the couch and force myself upright when Calvin walked through. "You're fine," he'd say. "You're tough." When my cycles started coming closer together and heavier, I upgraded my pads and laughed it off at work. Women's bodies are weird, I told myself. One night I ended up on the bathroom floor, cheek pressed to cold tile, a hot knife of pain twisting through my pelvis. Blood ran down my thigh. I could hear the TV from the bedroom, some crime show completely at odds with the way my vision blurred. Calvin leaned in the doorway, toothbrush in his hand. "It's getting worse," I panted. "You're 40, Nora," he said. "Hormones get weird. I see this all the time. Classic perimenopause. I'll write you something for the cramps," he did. Little white pills that took the edge off enough so I could sit through performance reviews without gripping the table. At night, I lay curled away from him, watching the blue glow of his phone on his face. We still talked about kids, but more like a story than a plan. The first pregnancy test I bought felt like a secret. I peed on the stick at dawn, heart pounding. One line appeared, stark and solitary. I threw it out before he woke up. Months later, after a stretch of actually trying, I showed him the second test. Same single line. He glanced at it, then at me. "Hey," he said, wrapping an arm around me. "These things take time. Stress doesn't help." "How much time?" I asked. He kissed my forehead. "Trust me, okay? I'm literally an OBGYN. If something was wrong, I'd know." He drew blood to check my levels in his office one afternoon. Tourniquet, swab, needle, tube. He sealed the vials, stuck them in a bag. "I'll call if anything looks off," he said. He never called. When I asked, he waved it away. All within range. Some women's bodies just don't like pregnancy. Nothing dramatic. The way he said your body made it sound like a broken appliance he'd inherited. The year I turned 35, the pain stopped asking for permission. One moment I was at my desk, typing an email about vacation accrual. The next, a bolt of pain ripped through my right side so violently my vision went white. I collapsed to the carpet, clutching my abdomen. By the time the paramedics rolled me into the ER, Calvin was already there in his white coat, taking my hand like a movie hero, appendicitis. He said, "We'll take it out." Routine. I'm not letting some random resident cut into my wife. He insisted on transferring me to Mercer Women's Health Center. "I know every inch of that OR," he told the attending. "She's safer with my team." I was in too much pain to argue. I remember the bright circle of the surgical light, the cold of the table under my back, the mask lowering toward my face. Calvin leaned over me, eyes steady above his surgical mask. "Count backwards from 10, he said. "When you wake up, it'll all be over. I've got you." His hand was warm on my shoulder. I remember getting to 7. When I woke, the sharpness was gone, replaced by a deep soreness. Machines beeped softly. A nurse adjusted my IV. Calvin stood at the foot of the bed. "Textbook," he said. "Appendix was angry, but we got it. You scared me." He brushed hair off my forehead, kissed my temple. I apologized for scaring him. In the months that followed, the pain never really left. It moved lower, deeper. My periods went from odd to chaotic. Sometimes they vanished for weeks, teasing hope. Then blood would hit like a storm, heavy and clotted, leaving me pale and hollow. "Bodies reset after surgery," Calvin said, tapping his pen on my chart at the kitchen table. "Yours is recalibrating. We'll tweak your hormones. It'll settle," he said, recalibrating like he'd built me himself. For a long time, I believed him. I had spent my entire life believing the people who said they knew better. But somewhere around my 42nd birthday, curled on the bathroom floor again, forehead pressed to cold tile, pain pulsing through me like a siren, a small voice inside finally whispered, "This is not normal." For the first time in my life, I didn't completely shut it down. That was the lie I clung to the morning I sat in my car outside Riverside County General Hospital, fingers trembling on the steering wheel. The sky was gray, the kind that made the whole world feel like it was holding its breath. I wasn't supposed to be there. Calvin thought I was at a book club meeting. I didn't even belong to one. Inside the hospital, everything smelled like antiseptic and vending machine coffee. I checked in under my maiden name, Hayes, just in case anyone from Calvin's clinic was around. My heart thrashed in my chest as I sat on the crinkling paper of the exam table, staring at the posters about women's health I'd seen 1,000 times. When Dr. Jonah Reed walked in, I braced myself for judgment. Instead, he gave me a steady, searching look. The kind that made it feel like he saw past the polite smile I'd plastered on. "What's going on?" he asked, pain. I said, "Bad. Months. Maybe years." He didn't rush, didn't assume, didn't interrupt, just listened. He dimmed the lights and started the ultrasound. The hum of the machine filled the room. Cool gel. The probe pressed into my lower belly. He watched the screen, brow furrowing just slightly. Then his whole expression changed. Harder, sharper. "Have you ever had an IUD placed?" he asked. My stomach dropped. "No," I whispered. "Never." He changed angles, zoomed in. The shape was undeniable, even to someone who had no medical training. A dark, jagged silhouette embedded in tissue. "This isn't recent," he said quietly. "It looks old." Blood rushed in my ears. He clicked the machine off, wiped the gel from my skin, and sat across from me. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said. "This device should not be inside you. It looks like a Seraph 200. That model was banned years ago. I've never—" My voice cracked. "I would know." His eyes softened. "That's why I'm concerned." I felt the room tilt, felt something in my chest collapse inward. "You need surgery," he said. Soon, when I told Calvin over the phone that I needed a cyst removed, my lie for the day, he barely reacted. "Okay," he said, "let me know when you're home. No fear. No questions. No surprise." I didn't know it then, but his lack of reaction was its own confession. I checked into Riverside under Jonah's care. Everything moved fast. Vitals, blood work, paperwork shoved under my pen. My hands shook so hard I could barely write my name. In the OR, overhead lights blazed like miniature suns. "Dr. Leonard Briggs introduced himself with a curt nod, then said, "We'll take good care of you." When I woke, my mouth was dry and my abdomen felt like someone had carved into it with a hot blade. Briggs sat beside the bed, mask hanging around his neck. "We removed it," he said. "But Nora, this wasn't just any IUD, it's a Seraph 200. These have been off the market for years because of their link to pre-cancerous changes." I blinked, trying to process. "I never had one." He exhaled slowly. "Someone put it there." Those words cracked something inside me so violently I could barely breathe. Hours later, Detective Harper Lou walked in. Sharp jawline, dark blazer, eyes that missed nothing. She pulled up a chair and opened a small notebook. "I understand you didn't consent to this device," she said, voice level. "No," I croaked. "When was your last surgery?" 8 years ago. "Appendectomy." "My husband performed it." She paused, pen hovering. "Your husband is Dr. Calvin Mercer, Mercer Women's Health Center." Recognition flickered across her face. She knew the name. "I'm going to look into this," she said carefully. "But just so you understand, if someone intentionally placed a banned device inside you without consent, that is a felony. Depending on intent, it could be more felony." The word echoed like a gunshot. I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But when Harper returned the next day holding a printed log from Calvin's clinic, something inside me finally snapped. "Device disposal record," she explained. "Serial number S, TWO-negative 88,419, listed as defective. Scheduled for destruction." My heart slammed against my ribs. "That's the exact serial number of the device we removed from you." She flipped the page. Signed by Dr. Calvin Mercer. The edges of the world blurred. My breath hitched. My hands went numb. Calvin had written off a dangerous, illegal device as destroyed, then put it inside me. That was the moment the lie of my entire marriage began to crumble. The moment the floor gave out beneath me. The moment I understood the truth in a way that made my skin go cold. I had married a man who could hurt me with the same hands he used to heal strangers. I didn't know it then, but everything that came next would be worse. I left the hospital 3 days after surgery with a soft brace around my abdomen and a storm inside my chest. I drove straight to Mercer Women's Health Center because I needed to see something with my own eyes. Needed to know whether the man I'd trusted for 15 years was the same man who'd signed off on the destruction of the device that had been inside me. The clinic lobby looked different now. Too bright, too clean, like a set meant to disguise something rotten. I signed in under Nora Hayes, ignoring the receptionist's frown, and walked the hall I'd walked 100 times as the doctor's wife. Calvin's office smelled like cedar and antiseptic. His diplomas lined the walls, smiling patients framed on shelves. A curated life. A curated man. I opened the drawer where he kept unfiled charts, then the cabinet where he stored pharmaceutical samples. Nothing. Then the safe. Combination 061704. His mother's birthday, the woman he valued above all else. Inside, financial records, surgical logs, and a thick binder labeled Device Disposal. My pulse hammered. I flipped through, pages crackling beneath my fingers, until I saw it. Serif 200. Serial number S-88419. Marked defective, destroyed. Signed by Calvin in his looping script. Something inside me twisted rage, grief, disbelief, all tangled together. The office door opened behind me. I spun around. Tessa Cole stood there in her pale pink scrubs, cheeks flushed, eyes wide. Young, too young, 27, maybe. A thin gold ring glittered on her right hand, simple, delicate, painfully familiar. "Nora," she whispered. "What are you doing here?" She clutched something behind her back. A pregnancy test. The branding was unmistakable. My stomach dropped. "I got discharged early," I said. "I needed to check something." She swallowed hard. "Dr. Mercer said you were resting. You shouldn't be here." I nodded at the test in her hand. "Congratulations." Color drained from her face. It's not, I stepped closer. "Is it his?" Her lips trembled. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Before she could speak, a woman's voice called from the hall. "Tessa, do you have a minute?" A pregnant woman, 8 months at least, approached, smiling tiredly. Denise Walker, a longtime patient. She cupped Tessa's elbow affectionately. "Thank you for helping with the apartment stuff," she told her. "I don't know what I would have done without you. Dr. Mercer is such a blessing." Apartment. Blessing. My knees nearly buckled. "He's helping you?" I asked Denise, keeping my voice steady. "Oh, yes," she said proudly, he insisted. "He said women like us deserve stability. Women like us, plural." I felt the room tilting again. Not from pain this time, but from clarity. Calvin had a pattern: women younger, struggling, isolated, women who needed someone to play hero, women who wouldn't question too much. And me, his controlled, contained wife, was the obstacle he had to medically eliminate. The clinic security guard's phone rang. He glanced at me, then at the office behind me. "Yes, sir," he said into the receiver. "She's here, in your office. Looking through your things." Calvin knew. He was coming. I snapped photos of the disposal log, the serial number, the signature. My hands were shaking but steady enough. Tessa hovered near the door, torn between fear and guilt. "Nora, I didn't know," she whispered. "He told me you were infertile. From birth. He said your marriage was just routine." I stared at her. Not with hatred, but with the crushing weight of betrayal that extended beyond him. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "Rosie is 5. Finn is 3. 5. 3. Exactly the years I spent doubled over in pain while he comforted me on the couch. Footsteps sounded down the hall. Heavy, fast. Calvin's stride. Tessa froze. "You should go," she whispered. "Please." I left before he reached the office, gripping my phone like a lifeline. When I pulled into our driveway, dusk painted the house in a soft golden glow, pretending it was still a home. Inside, everything was exactly where we'd left it: his jacket on the chair, my mug on the counter. A portrait of us smiling at a charity gala hung in the hallway, mocking me. I went to his office, took a deep breath, turned on his computer. Password 061704 again. He never changed anything he thought he owned. Desktop folders snapped open. Medical articles, photos, clinic finances, and then one tucked in the corner, now and forever. Inside were hundreds of photos. Calvin at the beach, laughing with Tessa, little Rosie on his shoulders, curls flying, Finn asleep on his chest, Christmas mornings, pumpkin patch trips, birthday cakes, a whole life. Their life, built in the cracks of mine. At the bottom of the folder, emails. One line seared itself into me like a brand. "You don't have to worry. I handled it during her appendectomy. She won't ask about kids again." The world narrowed to a pinpoint. My breath came sharp and thin. My husband hadn't just replaced me. He had removed me, surgically, permanently. I printed the ultrasound images Jonah had given me, the pathology report Briggs had signed, the disposal log photos Harper had sent, spread them across Calvin's desk like crime scene evidence. The garage door rumbled open. Calvin's footsteps echoed through the hall. "Nora," he called. "I got home early. I brought dinner. Thought I'd surprise you." His voice, warm, rehearsed, familiar, sent a chill down my spine. I sat in his chair, facing the door, waiting. Waiting for the man I'd finally stopped protecting. Calvin stepped into the office doorway with a takeout bag dangling from his hand, the smell of garlic bread drifting in behind him. His eyes landed on the papers spread across his desk, then on the email frozen on the monitor. The bag slipped from his fingers and hit the carpet with a soft thud. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice too calm, too rehearsed. His eyes darted over the desk ultrasound printouts, the serial number, the disposal log, the pathology report. "Why are you going through my files?" I didn't move, close the door. He did, but slowly, like he was calculating exits. The overhead light flickered once, humming. He took a step forward, hands out slightly, palms up. "Nora, whatever you think this is, it's exactly what it is," I said. "Sit down." A muscle twitched in his jaw. He didn't sit. He glanced at the papers again, then at the screen showing his email to Tessa. "You hacked my account," he said, voice rising. "This is illegal. You're violating my privacy. You violated my body." Silence clamped down on the room. He swallowed. His gaze shifted, guilt, shock, anger, all trying to grab the wheel at once. "That device," I said, tapping the ultrasound photo, "was inside me for 8 years. Embedded, rotting, damaging my uterus, causing precancerous changes. You put it there?" Calvin's face emptied of color. "I saved you," he said finally. "You wouldn't have handled a pregnancy. Your cycles were unstable. Your health, my health." My voice cracked like a whip. "I kept telling you something was wrong. You told me I was hormonal. You told me it was stress. You told me you'd know if something was wrong." He took a quick step forward, finger pointed. "I did know. That's why I intervened." "Intervened? You sterilized me." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "That word is inflammatory. You're being dramatic. Say the word," I said. "Say what you did." His mouth tightened. "I did what I had to. You said you weren't ready for kids. You were overwhelmed with work." "We agreed," I said, "a year. Not forever." He pinched the bridge of his nose, pacing like he was counseling a difficult patient. "Nora, listen. You're fragile right now. Surgery, anesthesia. You're confused. You shouldn't jump to conclusions. Stop talking to me like I'm your patient." He froze. I slid the disposal log toward him. Serial number S-88,419. Listed as defective, marked for destruction, signed by you. And somehow it ended up inside my body. He stared at the page, blinked, then looked at me with a mixture of pleading and fury. "You don't understand the pressure I was under." "Pressure." He threw up his hands. "You wanted to wait. I wanted children. I needed them. A legacy. My family expected it. The clinic expected it. Every surgeon with my credentials. You had children." His breath hitched. I stood, Rosie. Finn, his face contorted. "That's not, it's complicated. You built a family with her," I said. "Trips, holidays, an apartment, and you plan to, what? Keep me sick until I stopped asking questions." He stepped toward me, voice low, desperate. "I was going to tell you." Eventually, when I whispered, "after the cancer," he stiffened. I reached for the printed pathology report and held it out to him. "Stage 3 dysplasia. Do you know what that means?" "Of course you do." He didn't take the paper. I watched his shoulders rise and fall, breath sharp, trying to pivot, trying to reclaim the narrative the way he always had. Then his expression changed. Hardened. "You're blowing up our lives," he said quietly. "Over what?" "A medical decision you weren't equipped to make." A laugh tore out of me, raw, humorless. "You think this is about a disagreement? You committed a felony." He stepped closer again, this time fast, reaching for the papers, maybe for my arm, I couldn't tell. I jerked back, stumbling into the edge of the desk. Pain shot through my abdomen. "Fresh from surgery, Nora," he said, breath hitching. "Stop making this worse than it is. It's attempted murder." He lunged for the folder. Before he made contact, a voice cut cleanly through the air. "Dr. Calvin Mercer." "Step away from her." Calvin froze. His head whipped toward the doorway. Detective Harper Liu stood there, badge up, 2 uniformed officers behind her. The red and blue bleed of patrol lights flashed through the frosted window, coloring the room in violent pulses. Calvin lifted his hand slowly. "Detective Liu, this is a misunderstanding." Harper's expression didn't move. "You are under arrest for aggravated battery, medical assault, evidence falsification, and suspicion of attempted homicide." "You can't be serious," he snapped. "She's unstable." She broke into my files. She hacked. "You confessed in your own emails," she said. "Let's not add obstruction to the list." Behind her, footsteps pounded the hall. Tessa burst into view, breathless, tears streaking her face. "Calvin," she cried, "they said the police were here. What's happening? You told me." Her eyes landed on me, on the papers, the photos, the email, and she crumpled, both hands flying to her mouth. "You told me she was barren," she whispered. "You told me you never touched her medical decisions. You said," her voice cracked, "you said she was broken." Calvin shot her a look sharp as a blade. "Tessa, not now," but she kept talking, spilling truth like a dam bursting. "You put that thing in her. You bragged about how you solved the problem. You said she wouldn't bother you about kids anymore. I didn't know. I didn't know." Harper's officers moved in, cuffing Calvin's wrists behind him. He tried to twist away, eyes wild. "Nora," he said, voice breaking for the first time. "Please, you're my wife." I stepped back. "You were never my husband," I said. "Just the man who played the part." Harper nodded to the officers. They began to pull him toward the hall. He fought, twisting his shoulders, face red with rage. "You think they'll believe you," he spat. "You think anyone will take your word over mine." I looked at the desk, at the photos, the logs, the email. "I don't need them to believe me," I said. "I just need them to see you." The officers dragged him out. The house fell quiet. Tessa sank to the floor, sobbing. I stood in the wreckage of the life I'd built, surrounded by documents, lies, and the echoes of a man who had convinced me for years that I was safest in his hands. But as the last flash of police lights faded from the window, one truth settled inside me. I had survived him. The courthouse hallway felt colder than any hospital room I'd ever been in. Marble floors, echoing footsteps, voices bouncing off high ceilings. I sat on the wooden bench outside the courtroom with a folder in my lap, the edges worn from how tightly I'd been holding it. Inside were the very things Calvin spent 8 years trying to bury. Ultrasound images, pathology reports, the disposal log, the email he never thought I'd see. I wasn't here to win. I was here to be heard. When the bailiff opened the door, I walked in with slow, even breaths. The courtroom smelled like old paper and floor polish, the kind of scent that made everything feel permanent. Calvin sat at the defense table in a crisp navy suit, hair neatly combed, the kind of image that once comforted patients. His hands were free today, no cuffs, but he wasn't free. Not anymore. He didn't look at me. Judge Mariah Cortez presided, her expression carved in stone. She read the charges in a steady voice. Aggravated battery, medical assault, evidence tampering, intent to cause bodily harm. Each word echoed, landing like stones in the quiet room. The prosecution began with Jonah. He stepped onto the witness stand in his hospital scrubs, still smelling faintly of sanitizer, calm as a tide. He described the ultrasound, the shape of the device, the impossibility of it being placed accidentally. He pointed to the screen where a blown-up image of the Seraph 200 appeared, jagged and unmistakable. Next came Dr. Briggs. He walked jurors through the surgery, The removal, the damaged tissue, the pathology findings. His voice shook once, only once, when he said, "No competent physician would leave this inside a patient. Not for a day, certainly not for 8 years. Then Harper, she held up the disposal log like a live wire. She explained the forged signature, the device marked destroyed, the financial transfers, the pattern of secrecy. Calvin's jaw tightened with every word. Finally, Tessa. She was shaking when she took the stand. Her voice cracked as she admitted the truth, that Calvin had lied to her too, that he'd sold her a fantasy built on deceit, that he'd told her I was broken, that he'd bragged about taking care of the problem permanently. Every sentence cut through the courtroom like a scalpel. And then it was my turn. I stood, walked to the witness box, sat slowly, careful of the lingering ache in my abdomen. The bailiff swore me in. The prosecutor asked Mrs. Hayes, "Do you remember the moment you realized what had been done to you?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. It was the first time in my life that silence hurt more than any scream. I described the pain. The years of confusion, the nights on the bathroom floor, the ultrasound room, the scan, the realization, the email. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth the way a cut tells the truth, clean, undeniable. When I finished, the room was so still I could hear the fluorescent lights buzz. The defense attorney rose to cross-examine, but Calvin put a hand on his arm, stopped him. Something in his face had crumbled. Maybe for the first time, he understood there was no way back. Judge Cortez called for a recess. As I stepped out into the hallway, Jonah appeared beside me. Quiet, steady. He didn't touch me, just stood there like a lighthouse in a storm. "You did it," he said softly. I nodded, breath shaking. But deep inside, something colder and sharper settled in place. The trial was only the beginning. Everything Calvin tried to hide was now out in the open, and the world would see exactly what he'd done. He thought he had destroyed me. He thought he had written the ending. He was wrong. They hadn't broken me. They had given me the one weapon I needed. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, you already understand the quiet kind of pain that changes a person. My life didn't end in that courtroom. It shifted, slowly, cleanly. I started physical therapy, went back to work, and let myself rebuild without apology. Jonah stayed, not as a savior, but as someone who walked beside me. Months later, I met Lila at a foster event, a shy 6-year-old with wide eyes who reached for my hand like she'd been looking for it her whole life. I'm still healing, still learning, but I'm not afraid anymore. If you've ever felt overlooked, silenced, or betrayed, subscribe. This story isn't over.